All right, welcome back. It's the Avid Investor Podcast with me, your host, Josh Adamek, and here we are, episode 48. And today we're going to talk about some wins. I felt that was appropriate since last episode I talked about a few of the problems I've encountered over the years, and wanted to follow up with some of the wins that I've experienced over the years. And so let's get right into it. I just got a handful of properties or a handful of examples to talk about. Along with the lessons that I learned from them. So with that, let me set the record straight. I'm going to talk about some wins. I'm going to talk about some good deals that I did over the years. And just to set the record straight, it's not bragging. It's not boasting. It's none of that bullshit. I'm not going to spend the next 30 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, flashing big checks or talking big numbers. I'm not even going to tell you the real numbers. I'm just going to tell you, go through some examples of some properties and projects that I've had over the years where I've experienced a win, and what I've learned, the lesson that I learned from that. And you could take that and see how it could be applicable to you. So like I said, just got a handful to talk about here, and we're going to get into it. So first property that comes to mind, I was just brainstorming, getting ready for this, and just came up with a couple of examples over the years, and there are more than this. I just grabbed a couple that came to mind, and wanted to talk about it a little bit. So first property that came to mind is one that I did. We did this project, I don't know, it's got to be 12 years ago, maybe 14 years ago now at this time. It was a project early on. So it was a home out in Aspinwall, and this is when I was doing a lot of rehabs, big full gut remodels, big beautiful homes, got them down to the studs, rip them apart, do additions, rework floor plans and all of that stuff. Spend 6 months or more, sometimes doing a remodel, and then take a really, really crappy house in a good area, do the remodel and make it beautiful again. So it was really active in that for a number of years. So this property, for example, in Aspinwall, I get a call one day. We're doing some marketing, and my team was very small. We didn't at the time, I didn't have office staff or anything like that. So I was doing lead generation, I was doing bookkeeping, I was doing like a lot of the aspects of the business myself. So I was working some lead generation. I got a call that comes in, and this lady calls me. She says tells me she has a house for sale in Aspinwall. And I said, okay, I went through my what I call the buy call sheet. Just it's like 10 or 12 questions to get some basic information for the property. So I go through, I ask her for a name. She didn't really want to give me her name. I got her first name, and then she starts telling me about the property, tells me how beautiful it is, and this, that, and the other thing, and beautiful to her, but it needed a lot of work. And she had mentioned that the borough was after her with citations to fix the property. It was in disrepair and everything. So I talked to her for, it had to be a good like 30-40 minutes. I was on the phone with this woman, and that whole time she wouldn't give me the address of the property, but I got her phone number, I got her name, and we had a good conversation. Left it at that. She had to go, or I had to go, and I said, I'll call you back, we'll talk more about this. She didn't want to give me the address. She didn't want me to come see the property, so I put it on the follow-up. So 2 weeks or a month later or whatever, I think it was 2 weeks, I called her back. I said, hey, it's Josh, and we had another 30-40 minute phone call conversation about all different types of things. She still needed this, still wanted this, didn't really want to sell the property, but needed to sell the property. So we talked and talked. She still didn't want me to come look at the home. So I said, okay, I'll call back in a couple of weeks and check in. 2 weeks later, I called her again, went through the whole thing again. And this went on for at least 4, if not 6 months, where I called her every 2 weeks or every month and just followed up. And she didn't, she wanted to talk to me. She was, great to talk to, but didn't want to give me the address of the property, didn't want me to come see it, but I knew, she had to sell it. So this went on and on and on and on. And then finally she calls me one day out of the blue and she says, "Hey Josh, it's so-and-so." She says, "Come on over to AWOL right now and look at this house." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, what's the address?" And that was like 6 months in, 4, maybe 6 months into us talking every couple of weeks or every month. And she gave me the address. She wanted me to come that day. And I did. I was able to move some things around, go out there, look at the home. And it was, up in Aspinwall, great part of Aspinwall. I pull up, like you could barely see the home. It was all overgrown. I go inside, I'm talking to her. She's all over the place. She's telling me about the whole family history of the home. She's telling me everything, telling me how she doesn't want to sell, but she doesn't have the money to fix it, and the borough's after her and things like that. And, it went on and on and on and on. And we talked again. She wasn't to the point, or can't remember if she was to the point where she absolutely had to sell it that day or not. But long story short, it's at one point or another, and this is going back, 10, 12 years ago, whether it was that day or a couple of days later, I ended up getting the home under agreement to purchase. And we closed on, went in the house. At first, it was all overgrown. Like I said, on the outside, you could barely see the home. Navigated our way into it. I go in, I walk through the home. There's like trees growing into the home through the roof. And like there was, obvious signs of like raccoons and other animals being all through the home. Like it was a total disaster. And, so I look through it and like I go to leave and like I just wanted to like, throw my shoes in the garbage when I left. Like that's how bad this place was. It was rough. So ended up getting that property under agreement. We closed on it about a month later and went through the whole remodel. I forget how long it took, but it was 4 months, 6 months, something like that, like full gut remodel. Did the whole thing inside out, roof, windows, gutters, exterior siding, the whole interior mechanicals, drywall, opened some walls up, opened the rooms up, added a master suite, did like a mega reno on this home. And then it was probably 6 months later or whatever. We completed the home and sold it. And we did really well. It was a very, very, very profitable flip up there in Aspinwall. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this one in particular is not necessarily because it was a big moneymaker. I mean, it ended up being a really, really good project for us. But the key is like when the lead came in, I was able to get that home. I was able to buy that home at a fair price, a price that worked for the seller, a price that worked for us as the buyer. And I was able to get that home under agreement because of my consistency, because of my follow-up. I don't know who else she was talking to, if anyone, early on. I mean, again, this was so many years ago, but I could only imagine that there aren't that many people that sensed that there was an opportunity here and had the drive or the motivation to follow up. And I've learned this many times over the years, that the best deals don't always come from the first phone call. Hey man, you want to buy my house? Yep, I'll take it. No problem. And then the deal's done. Do you get some opportunities that way? Yes, absolutely. There's some pretty streamlined, pretty quick, straightforward transactions throughout the years that go relatively quick, relatively smooth. But what I've learned from this example and from several others just like this is that the best deals don't come from the first phone call. The best deals don't come from the first follow-up. When you look at your funnel, the follow-up is key. So a lot of times, somebody first calls you and they think they want to sell a house, but they don't have to sell the house. Well, motivation may change, circumstances may change over time, 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, a year down the line. So you want to make sure if you're spending all this money, time, effort, energy, and resources on marketing and lead generation for deal flow, you want to make sure that you're following up. Follow up is key. So that was the first example. Next property that came to mind. I mention this one a lot, but I call it the $100 house. Got a phone call one day. Again, I was doing some lead generation. This was early on. I mean, this was probably 12, if not 15 years ago. Guy calls me up. I do the buy call sheet. I take the information. It was a crappy house in a crappy area. His price was okay, not something I wanted to jump out of my chair at my office and drive across town to go look at and lock it up. But, I was early on in my career and I was wholesaling a lot. And I was, it was more about deal flow. So guy calls me up. I do the buy call sheet. I get the information. I know the area. It's a crappy house, crappy area. He gives me his price. I'm like, okay. I said, let's look at it. So set an appointment. I meet a guy at the house a couple of days later. Maybe it was a day or two later, or the next week or whatever. I don't remember when it was. But I meet him there. I walked through the house and verified it was a crappy house in a crappy area. And we're standing there in the living room. It was a crappy house in a crappy area, but he had it cleaned out. I mean, it was at least cleaned out. I didn't have to like climb over stuff to get a look. I remember that crystal clear. But we're standing in the living room and I'm talking to him, just building a little rapport. And I said, so what are you looking to do with this place? I knew the property, like I did the buy call sheet. I knew the information. I knew his price, but I always follow up. I ask the questions again when we're face to face. So I said, what are you looking to do with this place? And he looks at me and he says, I don't give a shit. Give me $100 and it's yours. I looked at him. I said, are you serious? He says, yeah. He says, I'm done with this place. Like, I don't need the money. I forget what his story was, but he was just tired of dealing with it. It was maybe a house that he inherited or, relative had passed or something. And he was like, he spent all kind of time trying to clean it up. And I think he's been burned, from a couple other buyers prior to that. And he was at the point, he just wanted to not have to drive over there and deal with it anymore and not have to pay the electric bill anymore. And he said, I don't give a shit. Give me $100 and it's yours. So looked at him again. I looked at him. I said, you serious? He says, yeah, it's yours. So I said, well, that's fine. I said, we can do it. Of course, I didn't negotiate the price. So I said, we could do it. I said, we got to do the sales agreement and, order title and go through the closing process. But, we could consider it a done deal. So we did it. We signed the sales agreement. I sent it the title, started the title and, closed on it about a month later when title was ready. And then I ended up wholesaling it relatively quickly for, more than $100. So that one wasn't like a huge money maker. It was a crappy house in a crappy area. But it was a good opportunity. It was a good deal. It ended up being a really good deal, ratio wise. It wasn't a huge money maker, but it was a profitable deal. The lesson I learned from that one is, when I had the buy call sheet come in, when I took the information, I sensed a little bit of motivation. When he told me the address, when he told me the condition of the property, I knew it was a crappy house in a crappy area. But I sensed a little bit of motivation there when we were talking. So, what I set the appointment, I went and I saw the house and, again, when I got there, I pretty much went through, the script again, went through the questions again, just to verify the information. And when I asked him for the price, second time, when we were standing there face to face, his price dropped big time from when we spoke on the phone. It may have been 2 or 3 days earlier. So point being is I always ask the questions again. I always follow up. And that one, for example, which, when I went out to look at it, it could have been a deal, even at his original price, but it had ended up being a good deal ratio wise, in the end. And lesson again, that was just something that I learned, something that I experienced. Go look at it. even if it doesn't sound like a great deal on the surface, if there's a little motivation there or something, and you got the time, just go look at it, go meet with the sellers, talk with the sellers, and you never know where you're going to end up. So that's it. That's the second example that came to mind. Third one that I want to talk about a little bit is an apartment building that I bought. And this was another one. It was probably, I think I owned the building for 10 years. So it was probably, another one that I purchased 12, 15 years ago. So again, I was doing some marketing, doing some lead generation. I think this one was actually, if I recall, it was an agent friend of mine that brought me the deal. So early on in my career, when I was starting to build my portfolio, I was just, adding doors to portfolio. So I was buying single family homes, I was buying duplexes, I was buying, some apartment buildings, and I was building, a cash flow portfolio. And this was much prior to switching to the equity model, where now we just focus on existing single family homes. And today, with my model, I'd rather own 10, 15, 10, 20, 50 single family homes as opposed to 10, 20, 50 unit apartment complex. That's my preference. And that's what works best for, our equity partnerships that we do, investing for the long term. But again, this was early on, I was buying doors. So I was buying a fair amount of multi-units. So this apartment building, go look at it, or, I get the numbers. I run an evaluation. I have the seller's price point, and what the other information that I had was how much the seller owed on the property. And I knew that it was a tight deal at that price point. But I also knew, going in, that it was a relatively turnkey apartment building. So there wasn't a whole lot of, capital improvements needed. So I did set the appointment, went and looked at it, and ran my evaluation, revisited my evaluation after, walking through the property, seeing the condition of the units and mechanicals and all that stuff. And I revisited my eval, and my purchase price, my number that I could pay, was significantly lower than what was owed on the property, the debt that the seller had against the property. And I'm like, I went to the agent. I'm like, here's where I can be on my purchase price. And he came back to me and he said, well, that's less than what he owes. And I said, well, let's write it up and send it over. I mean, we took the time to go look at it. Let's submit an offer and see what happens. He's, with hesitation, he agreed. So he wrote up the offer, submitted it to the seller. There was a little bit of going back and forth. And then at the end of the day, the seller ended up accepting the offer. So we closed on the property. I owned that building for probably 8 years, 10 years, something like that. And then, when the market went up, I ended up, exiting that building, with the focus that, with the, laser focus on the single family home portfolio. So, I owned it for a number of years, 8, 10 years. It cash flowed well. And then when I exited the property, when I sold it to another investor, ended up making some money on that. But that's not really the lesson learned on that. Of course, lesson is, real estate's a long-term play. So, that property, for example, I made cash flow for many, many years. And then, it appreciated over the years. And then when I exited the property, there was a gain there. There was a win. So, it was profitable cash flow wise over the years. And then there was margin at the end, at the exit. So it ended up being a really good deal. But the lesson learned on that one, for example, is if you take the time, you never know what a seller's motivation is. So if you take the time to look at a deal, to evaluate the deal, you might as well submit an offer. The offer, the number that makes sense. And again, you never know what a seller's motivation is. I don't know why. I kind of know why, but you don't know why a seller would be willing to accept an offer that's lower, to actually bring money to closing, for you to purchase their property when he has a turnkey cash flowing property. His reason in particular was he was focused on his business and he didn't have the time, effort, or energy to manage this apartment building any longer. So he looked at it as, it'll cost me some money to get out of this building, but I will free up the time to focus on my business. So that was his motivation in particular. So it ended up working for everyone at the end. So that was, again, if you take the time to look at a property, evaluate a property, do your spreadsheets, do your numbers, you might as well submit an offer. You never know what's going to happen. So, next example I wanted to talk about was the Kennedy house. It was a home out in Kennedy Township, and this is a similar scenario where this one was a single family home. I was buying it to rehab it and sell it. I get the call, do the buy call sheet, and again this one was years ago. Probably 10 plus years ago, when I had this property come across my desk. Seller calls me, says, "Hey, I have a house in Kennedy Township." We go through the buy call sheet. I get the information, probably pull it up on my computer while we're talking. He tells me, backstory on the property. I think it was, lived there and might have been part of a divorce or something like that. And then he owned the property. His kids were living there. His son was living there, and his son and all his buddies, and they were trashing the place, and he was tired of dealing with it. So he just wanted to sell it. Told me what he owed on the property. And again, doing a quick formula, I'm like, that's a little tight. I said, I unfortunately, I said, I don't think this one is going to work for us at that price point, because he owed a lot on the property. And I knew from talking with him, I was going to have a significant renovation to get it to full retail price. And there just wasn't enough margin there to do everything. So talking with this guy, he says, "You know what?" He says, "I got to sell this place. Can you just come out and look at it?" And with hesitation, I went out and I looked at it. You have to excuse me, just had to take a little drink there. So I go out and I look at the property. I'm walking through it. Well, first off, I meet the seller at the house. We walk in, and it was like frat house 101. Like, there's some dude, it was like noon on a Wednesday or something, maybe 2 p.m. And there's some dude passed out on the couch. There's beer cans everywhere, like ashtrays, cigarette butts everywhere, liquor bottles all through the kitchen. Like, this place, it was just like I said, a frat house 101 in the middle of Kennedy Township. So I'm walking through the home with him, and there was like sewage backed up in the basement. Like, it was disgusting. So I'm walking through it with him. I'm doing my rehab budget in my head as we go. We go outside or on the porch or something, and I sketch out some quick numbers, and I told him, I said, "I'm sorry." I said, we're too far apart on the price. Cause in my head, I just, I'm like, I know what he owes, and I know what I can pay to make this work, and there's just no way it's going to work. And he says, "Well, just give me your price. What's your price?" So I gave him the price. And if I remember correctly, it was probably about half of what he owed on the property. And I told him my number, and without hesitation, he took it. He's like, "Let's do it. I'm done." I'm like, "Okay." So I grabbed the sales agreement. We put it under agreement. We closed on it, rehabbed it. It was a huge rehab for the property, but it wasn't like a major gut rehab, because it was a fairly, like a 50s built, 60s built home, maybe a little bit newer in Kennedy Township, like brick, Cape Cod. So it wasn't like a full gut rehab, but it was like a disgusting, rehab. So we closed on it. Did the rehab, sold it, ended up being a profitable project. The margins were good. It wasn't like a huge dollar amount. It wasn't like a super high price point house, but the margins on it were really good. And moral of the story on that one, the lesson that I learned is, like, you got to kind of gauge the seller's motivation. When I took the buy call sheet, I knew he owed a lot on the property. And when he kept saying, "I got to sell, I need to sell this place, I'm done with it, I just got to sell it." And, when I told him on the phone that, I can't, I can't pay you what you owe for the property. I'm telling you that right now, based on what I see, what you're telling me. Like, I just can't do it. And he said, come out and look. I went out and looked, and he sold the home. Like, he sold the home to me. Again, another seller that brought a check to closing for us to buy their home. So, the offer that I gave him, in both of these scenarios, it was a fair offer, and neither one of these sellers had to sell to me. They could sell to anyone else. But my guess is that they tried selling it, and maybe other offers that they received were lower. Maybe they didn't have the rapport with the other buyers that we had. I don't know what the deciding factor is, but fact of the matter is, I took the time to go out and look at the home, talk with the sellers. I made the offer, and the offer was accepted. So I didn't force anybody to sell me their home. They could have went anywhere else. They could have done something else. They could have, the apartment building guy could have kept the home. The single family home guy could have, or the apartment guy could have kept the apartment building. The single family home guy could have kept the home. He could have fixed it up himself or cleaned it out or something, but the reality is neither one of them wanted to deal with it, and they just wanted to be done. So they were motivated sellers, and it worked out in the end. Next example I want to talk about is a home that was up on I think it was Mount Washington. Get a call from this was a couple of years ago, not that long ago, but several years ago. I get a call from a wholesaler. He's got a property on Mount Washington. I was very active up there. Still am active up in Mount Washington. And he knew that. He knows a developer, and he calls me up and he says, "Hey, I get this home. I think, it might be a good tear down and build an apartment building or something like that, or a duplex." I don't know what his rhyme or reason was. There was a city view, and he goes through the whole scenario, tells me all about it. And or this was actually going through text. It wasn't a phone call. And then he gave me the address and he gave me the price. When he gave me his price, I just assumed it was a typo. I assumed he left off a zero or something like that. But that's the price that he gave me. And I said, you know what, man, I don't know if it's going to make sense for a tear down and rebuild or anything like that, but I'm in the area. I'll come take a look at it. So let's check it out. So I went and looked at it. Walked through it with him and the seller, and ended up being a livable home. It was bad. It was rough, but somebody was actually living in the home. So we walked through it. Again, like, I went through the whole property, ran an eval, and I didn't think it needed torn down. I felt that it could be renovated, properly renovated and resold. It was a big renovation, like a full gut remodel, but the value and the price points supported the amount of work needed in that. So I went through it. I'm like, yeah, this is a good opportunity. I said, remind me again, what's your price? And he gave me the same price that he texted me. And I said, okay, I'll take it. I don't think we negotiated. So bought that property. Ended up closing on it. And at the end of the day, it ended up, just long story short, it ended up being a very, very profitable project. Lesson I learned from that is, like, I don't know what the lesson learned was, but some things that I took from that is, when we were going back and forth in the text, like, it was all over the place, like his ideas for the property, but my knowledge of the area and the property, I didn't think that what he was trying to do made sense. Like, tear it down and build an apartment building. First off, you got to deal with zoning and permitting and all that stuff, and the lot size wasn't even going to work for what he was trying to do. But it was a value add opportunity in a really good area. And we were going back and forth, and then, I didn't know what his price was until at the end I asked him his price, and he told me, and I was shocked. But point being is, like, I went out to look at the property, kind of forgetting about what he thought the highest and best use was, just knowing that it was a value add opportunity in a really good area. And I ended up closing on it. Ended up being a really, really good one for us. So that was that was example number 5. And then, last one that I want to talk about is a commercial property that I bought years ago. Um, this one, and I don't do a lot of commercial, but I was out driving around one day and I saw a building that I knew about. This building, I used to deal with the business that was in the building years ago. And I just happened to ride past one day and I saw the building was still empty. And I knew the business went out of business probably 5+ years ago. So it was a commercial building just sitting vacant, nice looking building, but it was gutted. Like it was just a shell. Nice building in an okay area. So I'm like, yeah, I like this building. It looks cool. I don't know what I do with it, but let me just see if I can find the seller. So I went old school. I tried to find the seller, and it was like owned by an LLC or something like that. And I couldn't get a phone number without digging too hard. I'm sure I could have, but I just went old school and I wrote the guy a letter and I mailed him a letter. And I said, hey, in my letter, I said, hey, my name's Josh. I'm a real estate investor. I see you own the property at whatever address. I'd like to purchase the property if you're willing to sell, something along those lines. And I sent him the letter, a handwritten letter, a typed letter with a signature on it, and hand addressed envelope. I mailed it to him, and then I dropped it in the mail, and I'm not kidding. Like 2 days later, I get a phone call, which typically it's uncommon that I send one letter and get one phone call back. Typically, like when we've done mailing in the past, we're lucky if we get like a 10% response rate or, 3 or 5% response rate. So if you send out 100 letters, you might get 10 phone calls. That's the reality in marketing. So I knew this was just slim chance that this guy was even going to call me because I didn't know him. I didn't know, the building wasn't for sale. I just sent him a letter. So sure enough, 2 days later, he calls me right back. And he says, hey, I got your letter, told me about the property. He was having some troubles with it, battling, some issues with the city or permitting or something like that. So he says, I'm just at the tail end of legal on this one. And I or whatever, he was dealing with some kind of issues. I don't remember what it was. But he said, yes, I want to sell this property. And I went through the information. There's not much of a buy call sheet with that. I mean, it was a vacant box. So I wasn't asking bedroom, bathroom count or anything like that. I just kind of, general information on the property, and it's been empty for a while. And I think he was trying to put a laundromat in it or something like that, and couldn't get the right zoning or permitting or something like that. And he was working on that for years and years and years. And over those years, he put money into the shell. I think he put a new roof on it, put new storefront glass in it, new doors, spend some money on the building, which is why it looked really, really nice, sitting there vacant. So we're talking, and I think he gave me the price. And when he gave me the price, I was surprised at his asking price. And I said, okay. I said, we set up a time to go meet, and I went down to the property. There's not much to walk through, because not much to look at, because you can see it, through the storefront windows. So I met him there, and went through the whole scenario again, the whole story again, and asked him the price again, and his price was the same. And I said, okay. I said, I'd like to buy it. So we went, we did a sales agreement. Believe he got his attorney involved just to review and approve the agreement. So it took a little bit of, a couple of days or a week or so going back and forth. Ended up getting that property under agreement, and closed on it, owned it for a while. And then I didn't do anything with it. I had some plans. I had some different ideas that I was going to do, but I just kept putting it on the back burner is what happened in reality. So I sat on it for a while. I owned it. And then, I think about 2 years later, 3 years later, something like that. I get a call or something from one of the commercial brokers that I deal with. And, she's telling me about an opportunity that she has. I think it was in Mount Washington, a land development deal. And, she says, she's telling me about the deal, and I jokingly, I'm like, you know what? I got more crap I need to sell than buy right now. I'm good. At the time I was like, knee deep in approvals on a couple of projects, a couple of development projects, and I just didn't have the desire to take on anything else. So, when I said that, she's like, well, what do you have? And I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? I got this commercial building. So long story short, we went back and forth. I sent her the information. I said, tell me what you think this is worth. And again, this is like, coming at, the market has gone up over that time span, and she puts a price on it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So you have my attention. So we ended up marking the price up from there. And I said, let's put it out here and, see what happens. She said, okay. So she put it out there, and like within a couple of weeks, boom, she had a buyer on the hook. I'm like, holy crap. And I was pretty excited about that one. That buyer ended up falling out. Long story short, the buyer was like all over the place trying to do a bunch of things, like assemble a bunch of properties for her business. And it was just like, for whatever reason, she ended up not closing, fell out during her due diligence period. So that deal was off the table. We went back on the market with the property, did like a price adjustment, and ended up selling it, long story short. So at the end of the day, I did well. I mean, it was a good property. There was money to be made. There was some margin there. Lesson learned from that one is, I'm always looking. Like you always have to look for opportunities. You always got to dig. You always got to follow up. I just happened to be driving around, and I spotted the building. I knew the building from a while. Like there was no for sale sign on it. There was no like, here, come buy me, I'm for sale. There was none of that. It just happened to be a building that I knew from my past, that I knew, from being out and about all day, every day, just driving around looking at stuff. I remember time and time again seeing that property sitting there vacant. So I sent the guy a letter, and there was an opportunity there. Closed on it, sat on it for a while, and sold it and made some money. So there's, again, lesson learned in that one is, it was kind of like, it wasn't for sale. Like it wasn't listed for sale, but I found, I ended up finding the buyer. If I didn't get a response from that first letter, I would have sent another letter. I would have just had them in the follow-up. And it would have been in the queue until I heard back from somebody. No, this property's not for sale. Don't ever call me again. Don't bother me. You get those kind of responses. Then we stop following up. But just like the Aspinwall house, for example, like the lady, every time I called her, we had a good conversation. Yeah, it was like 30, 40 minutes out of my day every time, but there was a conversation, and there was some motivation there. I just wasn't able to get the appointment and visit the home. This commercial property, I just happened to hit it on the first time, where I got them right time, right place, and got the opportunity. So that's just some of the examples. Again, like it's I think I said this before in an episode. If you're always listening, they say, like my mentor told me years ago, when you're in this business full time, when you're at it, when you're pounding the pavement all day, every day, the deal of a lifetime tends to come around about once a year. And that holds true for the most part. I'm not actively outsourcing like these big rehabs or big development or commercial properties or anything like that right now. We're pretty laser focused with building the single family home portfolios under the equity model. But that's what we do now all day, every day is, we're sourcing properties to add to portfolio. And while we have a buy box that we follow certain criteria that the properties have to meet, because we're always buying, we're always sourcing deals, those home run deals tend to come around. And it's a result of always being out there, always looking, always actively following up, sourcing deals, making calls, following up with sellers, following up with wholesalers, and the opportunities are out there. And if anybody tells you that all you got to do is flip a switch, then all of a sudden, all these leads and all these hot sellers, all these motivated sellers are going to be coming your way, chances are it's a bunch of crap. They're trying to sell you something. The reality is when you do lead generation, the best deals, the best opportunities come from follow up, and your absolute best deals, your absolute home runs, are typically the leads that you are relentless on your follow up, and you end up buying those properties 3 months, 6 months, years down the road, from that initial phone call. And why is that? Because a seller's motivation tends to change over time. Every once in a while, again, if you're doing this business all day, every day, you're going to hit the occasional, like, the commercial property that I bought where I got in contact with the seller on the first time. They ended up selling. You're going to get the occasional, like the Kennedy house, where it was like, he called, he wanted to sell. We went out, we looked at it, and we bought it. You're going to get those deals, but it's all in your deal flow. It's all in your volume of deal flow. But I promise you, if you take anything from this episode, just know that the best deals are in the follow-up. So that's it. Again, I wanted to talk about some of the wins that I've had over the years, and there's more. I mean, we've done a lot of deals, a lot of business over the years. There's some more wins that I can talk about, but I just wanted to hit a quick highlight reel, following up on last week's episode that was on, some of the pitfalls that I've encountered over the years, and how I've overcome those. So wanted to follow up and talk about some of the wins. So that's it. I thank you guys so much for tuning in. That's episode 48 of the Avid Investor Podcast. And again, like, I got nothing to offer you guys other than some hopefully wisdom and some guidance on how you can start your business or improve your business. So I got nothing to sell. I got nothing to offer you otherwise. And the only thing that I ask in return is, if you find value in this, just share it with someone that can find value in the episode. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and have a great day.